Okay, good. So, good evening, everyone. And this is Tripod Care Emotional Wellbeing Hub. This is the February edition of the event, and it's really good to have you here. Thank you, everyone, for joining us from all the different places that you've been joining us from. And as I said earlier, my name is Dr. T. Ayodele Ajayi. I'm going to be your main host for tonight, but co-hosting with me are my co-hosts, also the members of the Tripod Care team. We've got B, who is co-hosting. We've got Ebu, who is also co-hosting, and we've got Denny. It may be that we've got other members of the team who have joined us already, but I can't see any right now. But if I do see any of them join us, I would acknowledge them as well. So this is a very important topic. I think it's really, really key. And the reason is because it's something that happens in our everyday life. Love is a very important thing. Love happens every day. And also, unfortunately, the opposite of love, breakups, heartbreaks happen every day. And so I'm hoping that this evening that we can really talk, exchange ideas, exchange thoughts, look at what neuroscience says, and really look at what just psychology, neuroscience, what it says about the field, the world of love. The interesting thing is that out of all the concepts that have been studied in human existence, love is one of the most studied concepts in human existence. But guess what? Even psychologists, neuroscientists, psychiatrists, therapists, everyone also comes to the conclusion that despite the fact that love is one of the most studied concepts, it's also still the least understood. Despite the fact that we've spent years and years looking into love, what is this love thing? And we are going to do an exercise this evening where we are actually going to be looking at what's this love thing. So that's really what we are going to be doing tonight. And I'm just going to share my screen. And okay, good. Right, as you'll probably notice that we've taken efforts to make sure that we get the love colors right. And in fact, I'm wearing a jumper to match the colors to really set the tone for tonight. So that's really on a lighter mode, but that's really what we are going to cover tonight. The reality is that there is a chemistry to love. When you hear they have a chemistry, it's not just cliche. There is actually facts, neuroscience backing that up. You know, when you say, oh, those two people have a chemistry, are they going out, or are they having an attraction towards each other? Are they catching love for each other? Or are they catching feelings for each other? The reality is actually that there is a chemistry. When people get attracted to each other, there are things that are chemical exchanges that begin to take place in the brain. And understanding those chemical exchanges can actually help us in understanding the world of love, but also in making the best of the world of love, getting the best out of it. And sometimes when love goes sour, knowing how to deal with the situation, knowing how to just negotiate the situation. So we've done our due diligence to make sure that we bring information that is quality, that is relevant, that is also up to date, and that's accurate. However, this is for public mental health education only. This is not a personal consultation by any means, and we're not aiming to make it a personal consultation. So if there's anyone who really wants a personal consultation in terms of making decisions about their mental health or about mental care, I would encourage you to please consult either your general practitioner or your family physician, whoever it is that takes a lead on your care. Please consult them and let them involve them in that decision making. Okay, so what's the game plan for today? You can see it's all love, love, love. So it's all lovey-dovey today. We are going to look at the neurochemistry of love. Like I said earlier, when you say people have a chemistry, it's actually true. It's literal. We are actually saying that there's something going on in their brains that is communicating with both of them, that is attracting them, and there are certain messages that are going on. So we are going to look at that. We are going to look at why love is good for health. Love is not only good for physical health, it's good for mental health, and it's good for global across board. people who are in loving relationships do well across board in life. And we're going to define what love is as well, because we need to be clear that we are not just talking about romantic relationships here. So it doesn't mean that if you are not married or if you are not married or in a marital relationship that you are not experiencing love. There are other means of having love, and of showing love and of expressing love and of being loved. So we are going to look at attachment styles and adult relationships. Believe it or not, one of the reasons why we need to be careful the way we interact with our children, particularly in their first few years of life. We are talking about their first 2 or 3 years of life is this. The way we interact with them, particularly their mother and their father, usually the mother being the primary caregiver. The most constant person in their lives is their primary caregiver. And usually the dad will usually then be the secondary person. Sometimes it's not this case. Sometimes it's the reverse. If the dad is a stay-home dad, for instance, then it might be different. However, the point is that interaction, the way we respond to them, actually forms the basis. We are actually building a template. We are building a structure, a format for them, which they are going to carry as a template into their own adult relationships. And whether they like it or not, they are going to be responding and forming their own relationships based on what they've seen us do in the way we've interacted with them in their first few years of life. I know it sounds scary, but we can also see it as an opportunity, particularly for those of us who still have children who are in that age, or maybe we have grandchildren who are in that age. It's important to make a note of that really the way that we interact with these young people, these children, these infants, forms a template which they are then going to carry over into their own adult relationships. And we're going to come to that. So why do we fall in love? Why does love get addictive at times? We are going to look at the chemistry of that as well. And then what happens when love turns sour? Unfortunately, sometimes it does. We know that. So what do you do? How do you deal with it? So starting from the basics, this is a slide that is constant for those of you who have been here before. You know, it's constant in terms of it's a revolving slide. And that's because of how important really it is. Because tripartite care emotional well-being hub, like I said, it's really about getting information so that we can use that information to transform our own lives. It's really about being able to use information to bring change. There's no point coming to these meetings and it's not affecting the way we do our lives. So that's what it's all about, that we really want the information that we share. If that's going to be the case, then it's important that we understand how to transform knowledge to action. And that's what this slide is all about. There's what is called the law of diminishing intent, or the law of diminishing intent it was first brought into prominence by a business philosopher, American business philosopher called Jim Rohn, who is now no longer with us. He lived up until the very early in the 90s. And he was the one that said that the law of diminishing intent states that the longer you leave something that you know you need to do, the longer you leave it undone, the less likely you're ever going to get around to doing it. The import of that is this, that as we listen tonight, let's take notes. Let's scribe. Let's share what we've written. But importantly, let's also look for support. And importantly, let's begin to quickly action them. What am I going to do tonight from what I've been, the information I've got? What am I going to do tomorrow? What am I going to do within the next week? What am I going to do within the next month? What am I going to do within the next year? What am I going to do in a quarter of a year? In that way, we can begin to translate that knowledge into practice. And I want to say that honestly, one of the things that motivates me and keeps me going is some of the feedback I get from how transformational people have found these events. Believe it, people do get in touch. They send emails, they write letters. Sometimes I get to church, for instance, and there are letters waiting for me. People actually write letters to say, send emails, send text messages. those things do happen, and it's just good to see that indeed this is making impact. So the reason why I said that is so that we know that these things can be transformational if we choose to let them be that way. So the first part, the left part of the slide, and the second and the right part of the slide are saying the same thing. It's just really archiving, it's writing things down. Action, take quick action within the next 24 hours. Be accountable to somebody who's going to hold you accountable. I mean, for instance, some of us need to take huge decisions or begin to reflect on the quality of our relationships. How are we going to make them better? So many things that to be able to reflect on tonight. And then, of course, let's keep assessing ourselves. So let's start with this very interesting slide. I've been speaking for a while now, so I want to hear from you. And please, let's type in the chat. What is love? What is love? When you hear the word love, what does it mean to you? So love is a physiological motivation. You know, I think that also it aligns with some of the points that have been made earlier today, that we're actually wired for love. It's the way we've been made. It's the way we've been. That's a natural. That's our default position. And just like we have hunger, just like we have thirst, just like there's a need for sleep, just like we are also wired with sexual desires. That's the way we're also wired for a need to be loved and to give love. And I think that's really profound. So it's really, really profound. That's why science we now know that when plants are neglected, they die. Do you know that there is now research showing, and you could look on YouTube for that. There's now research showing that actually that plants, when you speak to your plants, potted plants in your house, when you speak to them in a tender way, you speak to them in a loving way, plants that they actually thrive relative to plants that have been by themselves or plants that have been spoken to in a ill way. It's profound. So everything in life responds to the concept of love. Animals, look at animals. Animals respond to love. You can tell an animal that is happy, that is well taken care of, than to someone that is not. And in the same way, human beings are like that. So we are wired in that way. And I think that's one of the most fundamental things I want to share today, that really that's a natural, that should be our default position. Thank you, Pastor Janet, for sharing that, The 5 Languages of Love by Gary Chapman. That's a good book to have, and that's part of the ones that we should add to the list for today, actually, for the resource. So thank you, Pastor Janet, for that. Right. Okay. So in addition to all that's been said, the brilliant points have been made about love. So love is this. It's human to seek out and express love. We've said that already, that we are wired that way. It's a set of emotions, and somebody said it's complex. It's a set of emotions, behaviors. You know, people used to say, neuroscientists or psychologists used to believe that maybe it was just one emotion, but it's a complex, it's one of the most difficult to understand, or most studied yet to be understood concepts, because it's a cocktail of things. And I think it's important what Pastor Sandra said, that it's also different things to different people depending on what situation you are in. But these are the things that love is marked by. It's marked by intimacy, it's marked by passion, and importantly, it's marked by commitment. Initially, it might start with feelings. Initially, it might start with infatuation, but at some point, it's got to come to the point of commitment. And those are things that we are going to get to. It also involves caring, closeness, protectiveness. Think about the mother's love. Think about even the spouse's love in terms of protecting the other spouse, and trust. Those are the cornerstones. And this is not just about faith. It's actually what neuroscience is also saying. And whether it's platonic, romantic, or familial, whether it's love for a friend, love for a spouse, love for a child, love for a parent, the reality is that the impact of love is very, you can still get that impact. It doesn't matter where it's coming from. It doesn't matter who is giving or who is receiving or where it's coming from. The important thing is that and the reason I'm saying that is because some people might be thinking, I'm not in a long-term loving relationship, I'm not married, or I don't have a spouse, or that it doesn't put you on the back end, or it doesn't shortchange you in any way, because it's really, even there can be love in groups, in terms of a community of people who interact with each other and actually get the benefits from it. So, and like I said earlier, that what we are now finding is also that even when you compare maternal love, for instance, with romantic love, the people can see that there are areas of the brain that these different types of love stimulate the same area of the brain. But this is also another interesting thing about love, the fact that it suppresses, when one of the beauty of neuroscience, or that I'm finding, is when one of the things that I really find exciting is when science and scriptures align. Where there's a scripture that says there's no fear in love. Now, neuroscience sides with that when we're actually in love, that the area of our brain that is related to fear and that's related to social judgment and critiquing other people gets deactivated. Isn't that profound? So we've already known it, ageless wisdom of scripture, but science is now saying that actually when we are in love, what they are finding is those areas of the brain related to fear, social judgment. Now, that's a two-edged sword. It's a two-edged sword, because when people then say love is blind, that's why love is blind. Because sometimes you can tell that love is indeed blind, that one person in a relationship, or that two people really are not, or they are not doing well for each other. But because love is blind, they can't see it. And that's also an interesting point to make, that the fact that it suppresses areas relating to fear, that's a good thing. But also the fact that it suppresses areas that are relating to social judgment and being able to, and in fact, they even say that when you're in love as well, which we are coming to, that sometimes it also suppresses even that there's diminished activity in the frontal part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, which is the area for your rational decision making. So there's nothing, sometimes love is not rational. So maybe I'm hoping that some of these facts now will begin to put together some of the things we've always wondered about. That why is it like that? There's a neurochemistry to it. There's the chemistry to love, as we said earlier. And of course, at some point earlier, when people fall in love, the areas that are related to stress hormones can be turned up, because people want to get it right, and it's almost like I can't miss this opportunity and that sort of thing. But over time, things like cortisol get suppressed, and it gets things get more normal in that regard. So, what is the chemistry behind love? There are about 3 or 4 chemicals that begin to run riot when we fall in love or when we experience love, mainly romantic love, but it also applies to maternal love, it also applies to familial love. Oxytocin is a love hormone. And that's it's released in the area of the brain that's called the hypothalamus. And it's also like the bonding hormone. It's almost like it's the one that promotes bonding, and it promotes bonding. It promotes attachments. It also promotes well-being. It has a calming effect. Have you seen that sometimes when somebody who used to be on the go, they used to be so ungrounded, they used to be so agitated and on the move, they were not calm people. Suddenly they begin to experience love, and it doesn't necessarily mean romantic love, like I said. And you can almost see that they've got their legs on the ground, their feet is now on the ground, they are more grounded, they are less irritable, they are less they are less easy to annoy. It's almost like even sometimes I have seen this, and I'm sure that some of us might have seen it. Sometimes you can literally see the glow. People's skin begin to glow. Their faces glow. There's just a light about them. There's just a. It's almost like there's a glow to their lives as because of the love that they are receiving or that they are giving. So that's oxytocin. And one of the ways we are going to come to stimulating it, but one of the ways to stimulate oxytocin to mimic that actually is hugs. Anything that shows physical attraction, stroking a pet, giving somebody a hug in my house. Usually when somebody's been hurt, maybe they have a headache or maybe they're unwell, one of the things we do as a rule is that we give them a warm hug, and we always say we are giving an oxytocin. It's a good practice. So it's very common in our house. The children now know it. They do it to us, we do it to them. And so really, when people give you hugs, there is a chemistry to that as well. That's known to actually stimulate oxytocin, which is the bonding hormone. Oxytocin is also related to reduction in the blood pressure, which is a good thing. It's related to diminished heart rate, which is also a good thing, and suppressing the cortisol, which is the stress hormone. Because the stress hormone is good when it's around for a short while, when it helps us to rise up to the challenge that we are facing, but it's not good to be around for a long time, because if it's around for a long time, it begins to destroy the body, more or less. So that's one of the chemicals, that's oxytocin. Then there's dopamine. Dopamine is not a hormone, it's a neurotransmitter. It means that it's one of the chemicals that are exchanged in the brain that pass message from one part of the brain to the other. Whereas oxytocin is a hormone, which is released in the bloodstream to help pass messages as well. And oxytocin, the other thing is that oxytocin is associated with bonding between mother and child. It's associated with breastfeeding. When you breastfeed, oxytocin is released. Childbirth, all of those things induce oxytocin. So let's go to dopamine. Dopamine is the reward hormone. When people, every form of reward, every form of craving, every form of addiction, that's dopamine for you. It's responsible for feeling of gratification and motivation. So it's the one, and it's released when we have things that stretch us a bit, adventurous things. When you go on a racing track, when you climb a mountain, when you take on huge tasks, when you take on novel tasks, that's what releases dopamine. But we also know that it's also released when you fall in love. And it's also related to motor control. So that's dopamine. The other one is serotonin, which is the happy hormone. Serotonin has been linked to depression and anxiety for many years. And it's the happy hormone. It's the one that regulates mood. It's involved in mood regulation and emotional regulation, and also keeping emotional stability. Interestingly, serotonin is also related to sleep in terms of the fact that serotonin is it promotes the secretion of melatonin. Melatonin is the natural sleep hormone. It's a natural sleep chemical in our brain, and it's when your melatonin levels spike every night that your eyes feel heavy. Do you know that sometimes you really want to stay awake? Oh, I've got this report that I've got to get, but your eyes are just not letting you. Your eyes literally feel heavy, and your body just says, I've had it, I'm going to bed, even though your brain doesn't want to go to bed yet. That's melatonin doing that. And we know that serotonin does help with stimulating melatonin as well. Serotonin is also involved in appetite regulation and Exposure to sunlight is one of the ways to actually get your serotonin going. And let's remember that all of these things are chemical processes, releases that are taking place in the brain when we are loved or when we fall in love. And then there's also vasopressin. Vasopressin is very much related to, it's almost like a twin of oxytocin. It's also associated with long-term relationships. So people believe that vasopressin is the one, when somebody falls in love, they fall head first and they dive in love. But as their legs begin to touch the ground and they stand up, Vasopressin is what keeps them going. 10 years on, 20 years on, 30 years on, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 years on. That's what vasopressin is the one, and it's also related with to social bonding. No epinephrine or adrenaline is really about rising up to the occasion. That's why when people fall in love, do you see when people fall in love, it's very easy. Maybe I'm showing my age now. But sometimes you can just see the chemistry between two people, young people, when the more they are trying to hide it, the more you can see it. Because the chemicals are just running riot. They are jittery, they are restless, they are fidgety, they are pamsa when they are in that situation, particularly when the object of the love is around. And you can just tell it's written all over, and they think they're hiding it. So very interesting. That's what chemicals do to us. Okay, so there was a point made earlier about loving and liking. So this slide sort of helps us to be able to tease out the differences. One of the things about love is that there's an attraction, there's a strong attraction, there's an attachment, there's an affection, and that comes with caring for the person, wanting the best for them, really going out of one's way to make them satisfied, to make them feel pleased. And of course, there's also the fact that it's not always rational. Like I said, that there's a decreased activity in the frontal part of the brain. The frontal part of the brain being the most advanced part of the brain, where we take rational decisions, where we're able to weigh the pros and cons. And that's why it's important for us when we fall in love to also be surrounded with people who can help us. That's really very important. So now there is a lady called Ellen Fisher. She's done a YouTube video. Actually, it's a TED Talk. She did a TED Talk about 8 years ago. I don't think it's Durham University. I forget the name of the university now. However, Ellen Fisher is the queen or the guru of romantic love. She spent her career looking into the brains of people who are in love. Can you imagine? So when you are in love, particularly she studied people who have longevity in terms of their love and relationships, people who have been married for 20 years. And what she does is that she interviews them and she puts them under the scanner and she looks at their brain. And particularly she wants to look at what's happening in their brains. And one of the things she's found is that indeed that when people say that they're in love 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years on, that's actually true. That they're not doing it for social mileage. That there's evidence showing that, which is a good thing. But the other thing she also found is that she found that for people who had long-term loving, happy marriages, there were 3 areas of their brains where there was constant activity. And we are going to do an exercise soon. The next slide, I think, is an exercise slide. So it's important that we really concentrate on this to follow this very much. So let's think beyond just romantic love now. Let's think about all the loving relationships in our lives. Parental relationship to siblings, relationship to children. Will I ask that whoever that is to please mute yourself? So relationship to siblings, friendships. Let's just think about all those relationships, even leadership relationships in terms of the loving responsibility we have towards people who are under our care. So that's the way I want us to see this, because we are going to do an exercise soon to look at that. But anyway, what Ellen Fisher found out was this. She began to look at the brains of people who were in long-term happy marriages. What did Ellen Fisher find? Ellen Fisher found that there were 3 areas of the brain that had increased activity when it came to people who were in long-term happy marital relationships of years, more than 20 years. She found that the area of empathy where you're able to put yourself into that other person's shoes and sort of empathize with them, was one area where there was increased activity, where there was certainly prominent activity. That was one area. The other area that she found also had increased activity was in the area of emotional regulation. That when you are in a long-term romantic relationship or any romantic relationship, one of the greatest investments you can put into that relationship is to be able to manage your own stress and regulate your own emotions. And I think that's really key. I think I need to say that again, that when it comes to thinking about neuroscience, thinking about the psychology, and the title of that YouTube video is Anatomy of Love by Ellen Fisher. So you can check it out later. Anatomy of Love. She said that when you are in that type of long-term love and relationship, that one of the things you can do, one of the greatest investments, is to be able to learn to manage your own stress. Because if you don't learn to manage your own stress, it's going to affect, you are going to be projecting it and dumping it one way or the other on that other person, which I thought was profound. So the area of empathy, the area of managing, the area of our brain in terms of managing stress and regulating emotion. And the third one is the area of our brain where we're able to focus on certain attributes, where we're able to focus and concentrate. And what did she find? The deduction she made was this, that the reason why there's activity in those areas is this, that those people who are in long-term loving, happy marriages or really marriages, that what she deduces of this increased activity in the area of focus is that they've been able to choose to focus on the strengths of their spouses and overlook their faults. So 3 very key areas. 1, empathy. 2, stress management and emotional regulation. And 3, choosing our focus, choosing to focus on strengths and overlook faults. Because, as we know, none of us was made perfect. None of us came out like tailor-made, 100%, everything, just bang on the money. So we're intricate, unique bundles of strengths and faults. Very interesting finding. And then she didn't stop at looking at the brain. She then went a step further, that actually, now that we know what we know, what are the things, the hormones I talked about earlier and the chemicals I talked about earlier. She said, what are the things that we can do using the knowledge of those hormones and the neurotransmitters, the neurochemicals in the brain and the hormones in the blood stream. Using the knowledge of what we know about them, what can we do to maximize or optimize that knowledge to help longevity in relationships? And what did she find? 1, she found that in romantic relationships, in marital relationships, when she put people under the scanner and all of that, she found that sexual intimacy was a very important thing in terms of oxytocin release, which I'm sure we all know about. But also, she also found that regular contact, physical, phone, text, Zoom, was also important, because that was also related to the release of oxytocin. Both of those first 2 factors are related. And I always joke that years ago, there are some people who are in long-distance relationships, they haven't chosen to be like that. It's just that it's inevitable at the moment. Sometimes that's just the way life is, but not because of their own doing. But I also do say that I usually joke that years ago, I considered relocating and having to live abroad for a while for my family to come and join me. And I said, oh, wow, I don't think I can do long distance relationships. That's just a joke, really. But the point is that long distance relationships, if there are long distance relationships, it's important to make that additional effort for those contacts to be made in terms of phoning, in terms of Zoom calls, in terms of what sort of keeping the contact alive, because that's also those as physical as possible. The contact is the better for the relationship. And the third thing she proposed, all based on neuroscience, is the release of dopamine, novelty. That in those marriages, in those long-term marriages, that they kept things active, they kept things fresh. They were always doing things. They were always exploring new experiences, learning new languages together, going on hiking together, taking on new challenges together. All of those things, and it was all across the different aspects of their lives. That when those things happen, they actually pro-longevity in marriage. So just to recap, because we are now going to do an exercise, and like I said, it is not exclusive to marriage now. We are just saying, I'd like you to think about one relationship that is dear to you. It could be a spousal relationship, but it may not be. But one relationship that is dear to you, that you really think, oh, this is a relationship that I really want to make better. It's important to me. Like I said, it could be spousal, it could be a friend, it could be a child-parent relationship, it could be a parent-child relationship, it could be a sibling relationship, it could be whatever it is. But just one of them. And let's go through these points together. And I'm going to give you about a few minutes to do that. In terms of just think about it, I think it's helpful to write it down. So, how can you improve your empathy in that relationship? For instance, very often, I hear this often because I'm always in touch with the Gen Zs and our younger generation. And one of the things I hear very frequently in our community is they say, my parents haven't got a clue about the world I live in. They say, my parents haven't got an iota of a clue about what it feels like walking in my shoes. And if you don't know if you can't just put yourself in somebody's shoes, it's difficult to have empathy for them. And that's by the time I'm having this conversation, there's quite a lot of friction. There's serious friction already taking place, and that's where it's in the process of exploring that one day they say, "Oh, parents don't understand me. They don't understand the world I live in." Yes, I wasn't born in Africa. I was born here. I'm being raised there. They still think that they still think like I was born in Africa. That sort of thing. So let's look at empathy. You've chosen the relationship. That's one that you want to improve. You want to really improve on. You are looking at, how can I improve my empathy? How can I improve my own emotional regulation and my own stress management to impact that relationship in a positive way? The third one is that let's list the strengths. You see, there's no one that doesn't have their strengths. It's just that sometimes we focus on these faults, and the faults then outweigh the strengths. And the interesting thing, also neuroscience, is that what you focus on grows. Have you noticed that if you suddenly decide, I want to change my car, I want to get a Ferrari. That's not a bad thing to propose. I want to get a Ferrari. There are not too many of them around, but you notice that what happens is that as soon as you decide that it's a Ferrari you want to get, wherever the Ferraris are, you begin to get attracted to them. It's almost like the Ferraris begin to show up. They were there all along. It's just that because you now made a decision to get a Ferrari, you begin to see more of them. And in the same way, it's neuroscientifically proven that what we focus on festers, it grows. And what we deny attention dies. So, empathy, self-regulation, and emotional regulation and stress management, and our focus. And then the next bit in terms of action, obviously the only one will only apply if it was a marital relationship. But two, how can I improve the contact with that person? What can I do? What effort can I do? How can I increase my contact to really nurture that relationship? And the third one is, what novelty can I introduce into that relationship that can actually help us to be better? Does everyone understand what the exercise is? Yeah, please, let's just thumbs up all. So what's the benefit or the What's the benefit of love? Is there any benefit in love at all? Absolutely. And like I say, I keep coming back to the fact that I'm not talking about just marital love now or romantic love. I'm talking about love as an umbrella term. Even though quite a lot of the studies were done in long-term romantic marital relationships. Reduced blood pressure, so less blood pressure hikes, heart disease particularly, and the reason is because chronic stress is associated with heart disease, because chronic stress and inflammation go together, and chronic stress and inflammation are associated with heart disease. So there's clear association between loving relationships and reduced risk of heart disease, and particularly reduced risk of heart attacks. Interesting. So really, being chronically stressed is associated with inflammation, and inflammation is bad news for the body. Every disease in the body is associated one way or the other, is linked back to inflammation, chronic pain. So boosting the immune system, all of those things are associated with being in loving relationships. Improved overall well-being, longevity. There is now clear evidence as well that people live longer when they're in marital relationships or long-term loving relationships. And like I said, it's not strictly about marriage now. It could be a friendship. It could be a parental relationship. It's just being a recipient of love and giving love. And another one is gut health. The fact that a lot of people don't know that the 80% of our immune system is placed in our guts, in our bowels, in our intestine. 80% of our immune system is based. So it's now imagined that sometimes when people are chronically stressed, and relationship problems is one of the major reasons for that. Sometimes they have bowel problems that people just don't know what's the reason for it. It's just recurring bowel problems and all sorts of things. They are now being linked to chronic stress, and sometimes it's due to stress from relationships. And then lower risk of diabetes as well.
Can I ask a question, sir?
Please go ahead.
Yes, you said 80% of what? Something system. I didn't get that.
80% of our immune system. 80% of the constant immune system is in our gut and our intestine. Yeah. So, and of course, that's for physical health. I've said a lot. And then even chronic pain. People who, I think they looked at this in people who are married and who are happily married, and they found out that chronic pain was a lot less. That being in a loving relationship actually stimulates the area of the brain that controls pain. So it helps us to be able to deal with pain more. And of course, it's associated with less stress and anxiety, improved sleep. We've been talking about sleep. People who are in long happy marriages are less depressed. They are less generally. People who are in loving relationships are less. They are less lonely. So all of that, it's been well known, and generally happier lives, and of course greater resilience. So quite a lot. So it's not just physical health; it's also mental health and just general well-being. So now let's see. Okay, good. So I think we're still in sync. So I said earlier about the fact that we need to be very intentional about the way we interact with our children. I think the graphic on this slide says it all, that they are tender, and we need to be very careful, particularly in the first 2 to 3 years of their lives, because what we are doing is that we are forming a template and a foundation for their own adult relationships. The way we respond to their needs, whether it's consistent, whether it's loving, and whether there's predictability, is forming their own subconscious template of expectation. Pastor Maury, this is going to answer your question now about where obsessive relation. When does love become obsessive? So there was a British psychiatrist who did quite a lot of work, John Bowlby. I think it was in the 50s and the 60s. Did a lot of work about the maternal bond between the child. He looked at infants. He looked at 1 to 18-year-olds, 18-month-olds, 1-year-olds to 18-month-olds, that sort of age group, looking at their relationship between their parents, and they began to, particularly their mothers, and they began to put together information and began to see a trend. So he talked about attachment. He is the one that is credited to for the attachment theory. And what the attachment theory actually says is that when a child is growing up, the first 18 months to maybe about 2 to 3 years of their lives, that's when they develop this bond between themselves and their parents. And it's usually the primary caregiver. So if it's the mother who is the primary caregiver, who is the stay-at-home mom, who nurtures the child the most, then that's the mother. Sometimes we have stay-at-home dads, then that's the dad. However, the important thing is that this relationship, the bonding that they develop, is actually based on one, trust. It's based on consistency of love, and it's based on their needs being met. So, for instance, people who believe that, oh yeah, a child can cry from now to tomorrow, just leave the child alone, the child will be fine. All of those things, we're actually sending a message to that baby, and that when you are in a relationship, your needs are not meant to be met. And so when you find people who are clingy, for instance, in relationships, it's not because they want to be clingy. It's because there's something that is in their templates that's made them like that. And sometimes they might need to be supported to walk through that, to override that template, to be able to function well in relationships. So this attachment forms the basis of future relationships, like we said. And he looked at he found out three relationships. The best of them, obviously, the most desirable outcome, what we really want for all of our children, is secure attachments. They have a sense of safety and security because consistently their needs are being met. There's predictability. And what he found was that for such children, when they are distressed and they are comforted by their mothers, they will become calm, and they will return back to secure safety. And they are able to, based on that sense of security, they're able to fly the nest, they're able to wander from the security and come back to the security. So it gives them a sense of the world is a safe place. And that because the world is a safe place, I can wander away from my hub of safety. But whenever I need to come back, I can come back for support, and the support will always be there. And in a minute, in the next slide, we are going to look at how that translates into how they then do relationships. Obviously, their relationships are settled. They are not the type of people who will be constantly scrutinizing the phones of their husbands or their wives because they don't trust, for no apparent reason. They don't trust that they are being faithful. There's no apparent reason for it, but because of their own insecurity. And that's not to apportion blame in any way. It's just to say that these things happen, but there's a reason for it. And it's also important for the spouse to know that my wife or my husband is not trying to be obstinate or to be difficult when they don't trust me that way. It's because there is something, because they've been let down by their primary caregiver years ago, and that's the template they're working to. So that's secure attachment. It also children who have a secure attachment, it also helps them in regulating their own emotions. We talked about regulating emotions and how that can impact on relationships. So that's important. And then we have the insecure avoidant attachment. So there's secure, there's now insecure avoidant attachment. That's the one in which there's it's almost like zooch, no attachment, it's no emotional closeness. This person, the relationship that they have with their primary caregiver is the relationship that they have with every other person. Those are the type of children that it's almost like they bond with everyone every time so easily, because there's no secure one that is keeping them. It's almost like they are looking at the world, going around, trying to, who is going to take me? Who is going to take me? Who is going to, I have this need for a solid base of safety and security. Who is going to give it to me? They won't say that verbally, but their actions as a child, as children, and their actions more as adults expresses that. And so there's no closeness, and so there's no closeness, there's no attachment, and they avoid the caregiver. And what you can also find is that in their adult relationships, they might find it difficult to trust people. They might find it difficult to settle. It's almost like they're always moving on, or at the verge of commitment points. They just literally deliberately, subconsciously, not deliberately, subconsciously sabotage the relationship. They don't realize they're doing it. It's almost that they're working to plan. And then there's the insecure, anxious attachment. Also, Pastor Maureen, this is the answer to your question. These are the people who are so clingy and obsessive that it's almost like they enter into that relationship and that person feels suffocated, literally. And the reason why it happens is because there was unpredictability about the love and about the consistency of their needs being met as children. So when anybody enters into their life, they can't quite be sure. Am I sure you are going to be here or not? Are you going to abandon me? So rather than let you abandon me again, I'm going to cling to you and monitor your every move, follow you around the world, want to be really involved in every single minute of your life, such that you are beginning to feel, wow, how is life going to be in 10, 20 years time with this person? Because the spouse is feeling suffocated, literally. And they are not aware they are doing it. So they are clingy, there's distress, and when there's separation for any, there's a fear for separation, because that fear of separation is actually a fear of abandonment. And that sort of insecure attachment comes with depression and anxiety as well. It's associated with depression and anxiety. I'm hoping that some of these things you are finding insightful and revealing. So we're going to come back to that slide later. So what happens in romantic? So those templates, the secure, the anxious, and the avoidant, they form a template for future relationships. And so these guys, when Bowlby did his work, in the 50s and 60s, and these people from the University of Denver, they then tried to match Bowlby's work onto adult relationships, and they were the ones that then came up with these points that if somebody is anxious and ambivalent in their relationships, if that's the attachment they developed, they are the people that are worried that their spouses don't love them. They are always looking for affirmation, always wanting affirmation. They are the ones that sort of they are suffocating in their love to their partner. They are always craving physical contact. So it's obsessional, it's obsessive. It's almost like their life is on a hold and the other person's life is almost at a standstill as well, because they can't breathe at all. And then the avoidant attachment, they are the ones that they have a phobia for vulnerability. They can't open their hearts onto anyone. So they've been married for years and years, or they've been in this friendship for years and years, but you can't break through to them. And then, of course, secure attachments are associated with stability in relationships. There is no undue fear of abandonment or infidelity. Obviously, if there is a reason for it, it's there, but there is no undue, unlike what happens with the anxious, ambivalent person. Right. So what happens when love goes sour? Unfortunately, it does happen. It's the reality of life that sometimes that does happen. So, and then there's what is called the heartbreak syndrome. It's commonly associated with people who have lost a long-term spouse. But it's not just that. People who have also, so it's loss of a spouse, loss of a romantic relationship, either to bereavement or to break up, or even it could even be the loss of any overtly acutely stressful situation. It's called Takotsubo cardiomyopathy, where the heart suddenly, no previous heart disease. Suddenly from that stress, the heart just begins to misbehave, and the heart actually fails. So when they say people died of a broken heart, that's what's happened. It is actually true that people could die from a broken heart. It's a sudden onset, and those relationship breakups can cause it. There's intense fear, shock, or extreme stress. Financial trouble, sudden financial trouble can cause it. But the manifestation, chest pain, shortness of breath, feeling breathless, and the ECG changes. Actually, on investigation, you can actually see that it looks like a heart attack. The only thing is when they then go and investigate the heart and they look at the vessels of the heart, there's nothing wrong with them. That's the only difference. It looks like a heart attack. The heart may also fail. But when people then look into when they look at the vessels of the heart, they do an echocardiogram, they do a scan of the vessels of the heart. They don't find anything wrong with the vessels. So the only thing they can attribute it to is that stress. And over time, people have now found out that this is actually a clinical syndrome. So that's the power of love. It can make, but also when it's not managed well, it can break, which is really profound. Supportive care, managing stress and managing the underlying condition is actually the way to deal with that. Mr. Solomon, I can see your hand. I'll come to you shortly. So that's the way to really do that, to really deal with it. You just it's really about supporting those people and helping them through that difficult period. Somebody says, could outbreak syndrome affect menstrual cycle? That's not something I've specifically read about or seen anywhere, but with the level of stress that might have caused the heartbreak in the first instance, I think that when somebody has a heartbreak, it may not even be the heartbreak syndrome. The stress from that heartbreak could actually disrupt the menstrual cycle, because we know that when women are stressed anyway, maybe there's an exam coming, or they just had a difficult time, or they are stressed at work, it can affect the menstrual cycle. So that might be the reason why. So it might be an independent thing related to the stress causing it, rather than the heartbreak syndrome itself. And of course, it's also about lifestyle changes, what the person needs to do. Right, I think we've done that. Okay, so like I say, I think this is about the second to the last slide in terms of running through the slides here. The other slides are just standard slides, and yeah. So I'm coming to you, Mr. Solomon. I'm just going to finish this. So recovery from romantic breakups, basically, they do happen. Sometimes we need to support people who are at a breakup. Maybe sometimes we are the one who is supported. But what are the things to do? One, it's important to acknowledge and allow yourself to grieve, to feel the emotions. Sometimes people they've been in a long-term relationship and it then packs up, it breaks up. Life does happen that way sometimes, unfortunately, sadly. And they say, oh, it's okay. Nothing's happened. I'm just going to carry on with my life. That's not reality. It's not reality. It's important to talk about it. It's important to journal about it. It's important to feel the emotion, the anger, the anger, the pain, the feeling of betrayal, the feeling of being left alone, the loneliness, the sadness, all of those the cocktail of emotions that come. It's important to feel that. Some people feel it by journaling. Some people feel it by talking to somebody. Some people feel it physically by burning it out. But whichever way, it's important to sort of romance that pain in terms of really identify it and come to terms with it and accept that it's there. Importantly, the social media world, recently, I think within the last year, I read something very poignant in terms of how social media age has introduced difficulty into marital or romantic breakups. Because before, if you break up with somebody, maybe they live in London, you live in Kent, maybe it's a romantic relationship, or maybe it's a divorce, they move away. You may not hear anything about them again, because everybody has gone their different ways and you begin to build your life again. But guess what? In this day and age, you are still seeing what they are eating for dinner. You are still seeing where they went on holiday. You are still seeing who their new relationship is. You are still seeing that they've got a pay rise at work. Why? Because of social media. One of the most cogent advice you can give to somebody, one of the most important advice that one can give to somebody who has experienced a breakup that is final. It's cut ties, even if it's for temporarily. Block them on social media. You are not doing it because you are malicious. You are doing it for your own peace. You are doing it because you want to heal. You are doing it because otherwise you wouldn't be able to move on. As long as it's almost like you are driving your car forward and you are looking, you are driving your car forward and you are looking at the back. That's exactly the way it feels like. Maintaining ties, or what some people also do, the Gen Zs look like they're good at that. They'll be ghosting them. So they open another different account on social media, and they I don't think it's ghosting it's called, is it? No, that's not ghosting. But basically they are snooping around. They open another social media account with a different name, invite this person, and they start following the person. The person thinks that they're just a random stranger who is following them, but it's actually an ex-partner who is tailing them. And these things happen. It's just prolonging that misery. And it's good for us to hear it, because some of us adults might need, or maybe we are leaders who need to support people through that situation. The best thing, and if there is needed to be contact, maybe because of maybe there is co-parenting, it's important to have clear boundaries. So it's not like the divorce is over and then the person wants to come and stay. Those type of things, you really need to be careful about clear boundaries, because they just play with the person's emotions. Prioritize self-care. When we are stressed like that, self-care goes. Appetite, sleep, relationship with other people. Let's prioritize that, because that is double jeopardy if that goes. Seek support from friends and family. Shift your focus. See the good in it. Just that I'm going to move on. Stalking, yes, thank you for borrowing me that word. Stalking is the word, yes. Yeah, see the good in it, and just rephrase the situation. Rephrase the situation that there must be some good in this. I may not see it now, but there is some good in it. And of course, intentionally forgive. You see, it's not just Bible. Even science says that if we continue to hold a grudge and we continue to wish them ill and all of that, it's like taking poison and expecting the other person to die. You are swallowing poison and you're expecting the enemy to die. It doesn't happen. It's the person who swallows poison who has the effect of the poison. So it's best to just let that go. It might be a process, but talking about it, journaling, seeking support, all of those can be helpful in helping. And of course, reframe the experience as growth. Wait to heal before jumping into another relationship, because unfortunately sometimes as well, people are jumping into another relationship not because they've healed, but because they want to fill a void. And what tends to happen is that all the venom and the anger from that unhealed wound is projected into that second relationship, and it doesn't stand a chance. I believe that's really my last slide. So yeah, okay, habits. So basically, psychology of that's a book, The Positive Psychology of Romantic Love, and then the Ellen Fisher YouTube TED Talk. It's called The Anatomy of Love. I think it was 2017, and we've also got a video on Tripath Care YouTube channel, which is called Toxic Relationships. Because today I haven't gone into the details of how do you identify a toxic relationship, because when romantic love goes sour, it goes toxic. How do you identify them? Recently, on our Instagram page, we've recently published 12 red flags for toxic relationships. You can check that out on the Instagram page. 12 red flags and what can you do about it. We've also published something recently. We've published another carousel on how do you deal with toxic relationships. How do you decide when it's time to go? All of those things that are on the Instagram page. And you can also check out the YouTube channel on toxic relationships. So those are the tripath dates. Please just make a note of that. You can take a photo of that for the coming months. And those are the things that are on the horizon. Those are the things we are looking to do in the coming months. Our church and charity leaders training will still be going on. We've done trauma, we've done what is mental health, we've done trauma-informed care. We'll be doing something else in September. And the tripart care mind gym course is also going to be going up. We are going to run that this year again for young adults between the ages of 18 and 40. Really very small, intimate group, really transformational experience for 4 weeks in a row. And we have a book club. The book club has been resuscitated, and the first meeting is going to be this time next week. The book club will be meeting, and the book, which some people have alluded to, is a brilliant book, is The Body Keeps the Score. All you need to know about trauma, really. Okay, those are all the things that we do as tripart care, and that's the QR code if you want to join any of the WhatsApp group. So that's the generic WhatsApp group. You can just take a photo of that, and we'll accept you onto the group. And we discuss all things mental health, all things emotional well-being on that group. So feel free to please join that group. And then that's for leaders, for church leaders, for charity leaders, leaders in the marketplace. That's specifically with this. There's a different conversation we have on this particular WhatsApp group. So it might not be relevant to you if you don't have any responsibility of leadership. But if you do, it's a WhatsApp group to join. It's a different conversation. It's really about taking care of ourselves so that we can take care of other people, and how to support other people as well, and the challenges of leadership. Like I said, our YouTube, oops, I think I've just lost my slide then. Okay, that's the Instagram page. So check us out on Instagram and feel free to follow us. I'm really excited about the things that are happening on Instagram at the moment. Really very exciting times. Lots of things already there in the last week or so. And then those are contact details. And now, question and answer. So thank you all for listening.